You are listening to TAP. Welcome, and welcome to you, Samantha Samuels, who is a fellow therapeutic astrologer. At least that's my word for it. But you are also merging astrology with psychology, and you have many years under the belt. Do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I am a full-time psychotherapist and a astronumerologist. And yes, I have been studying this now for over 25 years. And it's such a strong passion for me to be able to combine the influences of the stars and the numbers and decode this unique language, this ancient language that has been here for thousands of years, and be able to illuminate the wisdom of the stars and the numbers to the public.
I mean, it's so great because we are not that far apart in age, but you've been studying for over 25 years. How is that even possible?
Yeah, I came into it when I was only 11 years old. So it must have been studying it in many past lives, and then just the memories came back to me, like sort of as a download
Sure.
around that age. It was astrology first and numerology, I think, within a year after that. And currently, I do Western astrology, Vedic astrology, and numerology. So, in a typical reading, I would blend principles from all three. Although I do focus on one in particular, depending on client preferences.
It's amazing. I have to say that's a lot. But you have some Gemini skills I saw in your birth chart. So the whole synthesizing and being curious about different areas. That's good on you. And you say you're a psychotherapist, and do you do astrology with every client? Is it merged for you right now, or do you separate it?
For my psychotherapy practice, when people come with disorders such as depression, anxiety, trauma, relationships, I don't integrate astrology just because the
Okay.
regulating college in my area has not really said anything about that. So I'm not able to do that just yet. But for clients who come through my astronumerology practice, there is often a counseling component with that in the reading, but I also have a unique service just for counseling. So once the astrology and numerology chart has been read, people need assistance in integrating this kind of new skill set into their lives. I'm available for doing counseling with them after that. And I have several clients who I continue to see on a weekly or bi-weekly basis who need counseling based on their chart.
That's something I really love. I really like that order of it, to go deep into the philosophical context and information piece, and then do the inner work together. And so today we're talking about astrocartography, just one of the many themes that you've studied. But I just wanted to wrap up with this introduction, saying that you've also published a book on astronomology. And I think for many people that's such a treasure because you probably haven't had this, but as an astrologer, a lot of people will come to me and ask also about their name. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with your name. It's like a misunderstanding that we can do that, but then you can just take all of those kind of questions in.
Yes, I use the Pythagorean system of numerology. So there's lots in the name, and by changing the name, you are changing the energies that are influencing you. So it's definitely a weighty decision, or if you use a shortened name, or you use a stage name, or if you use a business name, there's definitely lots in the name. There are no bad numbers, no good numbers. It all just depends on what your goals are. So you can more intentionally use numerology depending on what you're trying to achieve.
And can I ask you, is that Samantha Samuels? Is that what you were born with, or did you take it?
I was born with that.
It's
Yes,
such a
my
good
parents.
name. It could have been a chosen name.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy with the vibrations that I currently have. So I have no need to change it, and yeah, no plans to change it at all.
I mean, I would have changed mine many times if it wasn't that I learned how difficult it actually is in practical measures. I mean, it's such a mess when you have a different name. So I've stopped doing that. Okay, so do you want to go into the astrocartography? It was your suggestion because at the moment you are kind of researching in that field. Is that correct?
Yes, it's astrocartography has been a lot more on my mind as, I work mostly remotely. So on a personal level, I've been looking for places to work for longer and longer periods of time, working while traveling. Even, I have a desired location that I would like to transition to on a gradual basis. So it has become more of an area of interest to me. I've always been doing readings for people on astrocartography. So, my experience in this area is from client readings, from people who I've observed, of course, from books, although there's not that many good books on astrocartography out there. So, you kind of have to do your own research, study the charts, and there's many, many components in astrocartography that one has to consider prior to deciding which area to move because it is a very weighty decision that will have long-term ramifications. Yeah, so many factors in there to consider.
For sure. And what better motivation to dive deep into it when you have to make that choice yourself? So, do you want to give us just like an overview? Because, like I've mentioned it to you that I have what I think is the basic downs, and I know to how to do it in a software program. But like you say, it's a weighty decision, so I would definitely feel I would need some input before doing anything. If I was to mistake one line with another or something like that. So I'm very pleased to be able to learn from you today.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I'll maybe start by talking a little bit about an intro of it. So the astrocartography map, originally it was developed, the ideas by Jim Lewis, who wrote The Psychology of Astrocartography, which remains one of the most important books in the field right now. So he talks about the ACG lines. There's also reference to parans, which can modify lines. Everybody can see their map. It's on astro.com. So you can visit the site, the Astro Click Travel. Although, again, you have to be very careful before drawing any conclusions because the line is just one piece of the puzzle, but there are many more factors in there. The influence of these lines, the parans, they can be felt immediately when you're traveling, but the relocated chart will take more of a time for its influences to be felt. So when the planets change houses, they will shift the focus of your life in different areas, making some less noticeable and others more noticeable. I'd consider transits and secondary progressions to the relocated chart to be important. So, if you have 20 degrees Taurus as the degree on your ascendant in your relocated chart, then at present, transiting Uranus, given that it is at 20 degrees Taurus, would be making a conjunction and it would be felt as if you had transiting Uranus to your natal ascendant. You can also feel this with
Right.
traveling for shorter periods. So, if you're planning a vacation or remote working opportunity, you should be mindful of the transits to your chart in that city. The presence of the lines are definitely felt more when they're activated by the transits. For example, if you would like to travel to a Venus line, it's more beneficial if Jupiter is making a close aspect to your Venus and preferably an easy aspect, like a conjunction, a trine, a sextile. Or if Jupiter is transiting over your MC, go to a city on your Jupiter MC line or another place where Jupiter is angular. It may be more challenging, on the other hand, if you visit a city that's normally under a good ACG line, but the relocated angles are receiving difficult aspects from Mars, Saturn, or the outer planets. And if for whatever reason you want to emphasize the planet's energy in your life at a given point in time, you could travel to a place at the same time of that planet's return. For instance, traveling to a Saturn line on your Saturn return, which is approximately once every 29 years, or traveling to a Jupiter line on your Jupiter return, which is once every 12 years, that could be fruitful for you. And you can also do it for Venus and
Okay.
Mars returns, which occur more frequently, of course.
Wow. Okay. So that's good things to note. If this and that. What if I have a theoretical question here? What if you have a couple who's fighting in one country and they experience not fighting in other countries? Someone asked me about this, and I looked it up, and I was kind of finding it could be. I think it's because I don't have your expertise right in this area, but for me, I thought that it's difficult no matter where they go, but they actually experience this.
Yeah, that is very, very common. And in fact, I actually had a case where a couple went on vacation, the time zone being 3 hours behind from where they lived. They were traveling through different cities in the state, and by the end of the trip, they ended up in a city where he was less than 20 miles from his Uranus ascendant line and less than 100 miles from his Mars MC line. And intense effects are definitely felt, if it's less than 200 miles. 200 to 300 miles would be a moderate effect. Anything larger than 300 miles is a weaker effect. To feel the effects in a conscious way, I believe you shouldn't be more than about, 300 miles away from a line, though they still might have a weaker influence past that. Paran should be within 70 miles of the line, but ideally less than 25 miles to notice their effects in a strong way.
But so you distill this down to an actual chart, like you were talking about a relocational chart, right? And what you're talking about now with the miles, can you see that in the relocational chart, or do you have to see that where the lines are?
No, in Solar Fire, there is actually a feature which allows you to track precisely how many miles you are away from that line. I
Okay.
don't think that's on astro.com.
Hmm.
But the relocated chart is a separate chart, which is based on if you were actually born there and you'd have to adjust for the time zone. But again, Solar Fire would just automatically calculate
Yeah.
that for you. Solar Fire is what I use to do charts for my clients. So,
Yeah, that's what I've been using as well. Yeah.
but going back to that case that I was illustrating, so he was less than 20 miles from his Uranus ascendant line and less than 100 miles from his Mars MC line. She was less than 100 miles from her Mars ascendant line and about 150 miles from her Neptune descendant line. Uranus on the ascendant descendant axis in the ACG can be a separative aspect, similar to Uranian transits to the ascendant descendant axis. At the same time, transiting Uranus was making an exact opposition to his Saturn and an exact square to his Mars, which are both malefic planets. Saturn also being the dispositor of his seventh house, suggesting the separation may be in his romantic relationship. Uranus was also making a square to her natal ascendant descendant axis, which suggests the same. So they are both experiencing this separative Uranus energy. Neptune on the descendant can make you see things unclearly, but at the right timing, it can also cause you to break free from illusions in a partnership or one on one relationship. On the day they broke up, transiting Mars made an exact square to Neptune, which is the ruler of his seventh house. Squares from malefic planets like Mars and Saturn will often bring problems to the angle or planet they aspect, the seventh being the house of one on one partnership or marriage. Mars being the god of war, making difficult aspects or being conjunct angles can bring aggressive, argumentative energy, and you tend to be less compromising with your demands. So they were both under stressful Mars lines, which increased both of their aggression levels, combined with the separative Uranus effects. Mars and Saturn, in any case, in a difficult aspect, tends to bring suddenly explosive outbursts. With these difficult aspects and lines, it's not a surprise that they had an explosive fight, on the last day of their trip, which led to a permanent breakup. Though they had fights before, they were never to the level of intensity as they were in the new city. With the result, they decided to end all communications between them.
Wow.
The relationship wasn't really on steady footing before, but the issues hadn't reached a peak where they became unbearable living at home. However, with the transits mirroring the ACG lines, the time had come for the breakup. Paran's play a role too, as he was within 70 miles of a Saturn South Node Paran, and she was less than 15 miles from a Mars MC Paran. Saturn, Mars, and Uranus transits and lines can be difficult, adding pressure psychologically, both individually and relationally, especially when compounded by different difficult Parans, which they were in this case.
But so you're saying some of it is for transits through the relocational chart. Am I correct on that? And some of it is, yeah.
Yes. Yes, you have to watch for the transits to the relocated chart if you are located in that country at the time or you're traveling there. But it's also your natal transits that will play a role in it too. So you have to consider both the natal transits and the transits to the relocated charts. Particularly the angles are very important. And progressions to the relocated chart also are affect you.
Extra effective. Okay. Did you have some examples with famous people?
Yeah, I have several examples of that. So, for example, talking about remote activation, very interesting principle. The principle of remote activation is that you don't actually have to be physically in a place to experience its energy. It can be brought to you by someone who was born there, raised there, or who spent a significant portion of their life there. It can also be brought to you by engaging with people who live there at present or getting involved with that culture through speaking the language, watching movies, reading literature, eating the food, and engaging in other aspects unique to that culture.
Remote activation. Sorry, I just have to digest this. This is okay. Remote activation can be brought to me by someone else, or even if I study a certain culture. So does it mean that that country's chart is affecting me, or how does it
No,
show
the
up?
country's chart doesn't need to be affecting you. It's just again based on the ACG lines. So by engaging in a more conscious way with lines that are beneficial for you, and it's not all that we're trying to go to Jupiter lines or Venus lines. It's not suitable for everyone just because they're benefic planets. That's probably a very underestimated fact when we're thinking about ACG because people assume they should just target their Jupiter and Venus lines. But if your Jupiter or Venus are not in good condition natally, then they're just going to bring difficulties if you put them on angles. Whereas someone might have a very well
Oh,
placed Saturn or Mars, and in that case, they would do really well by going to a Saturn or Mars line, or even a Pluto line, or Uranus line, or Neptune line. So nothing can be determined without the influence of the chart
good,
first.
good. Okay, okay. I was interrupting you there. Where you were talking about a specific chart, I think.
Yeah, so with regards to celebrities, Zoe Saldana is married to Marco Perego, an Italian artist from Brescia, Italy. Brescia is about 270 miles from Zoe's Jupiter MC line and her Pluto ascendant line. Jupiter on the MC are places in the world where you receive a significant amount of positive recognition and admiration for your work. Pluto ascendant lines give you depth, charisma, and magnetic appeal. It being opposite the descendant can give a very intense romantic and sexual attraction, one that can be transformative and life changing. In addition, she's got a Venus MC Puran, Jupiter MC, Jupiter Juno, and Jupiter Uranus Purans running within 70 miles of Brescia as well. At the time of their marriage in June 2013, transiting Jupiter was making a close sextile to her natal MC, and transiting Pluto was making a 1 degree quincunx to her natal ascendant. So that's one example.
What happened? What happened to her in real life? I don't even know her.
Oh, so her husband is from there. So that's the principle of the remote activation, is that you don't
Oh,
actually need
right.
to be there. But interestingly, she just did a
Right.
movie that was in Italy. I saw it on Netflix. I don't remember the name, but I just loved that series. It was a romantic drama. And it was based on a lady who goes to Italy and finds the love of her life, but then he ends up having a terminal illness and she has to take care of him. So yeah, for those who are interested, I'm sure you can easily find that on Netflix, but it's a beautiful series.
All of what you just mentioned before was brought to her by remote activation through her husband.
Yes.
Did her life work out better then? Yes, I love that. That is really true, right? That sometimes it's the illusion that we buy. It's that not because this is the best person. It's just something else. There's other factors to it. So yeah, that makes sense. Was she famous before though? Just last question. Was she famous before?
Oh yeah. Yeah, she's a major star.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's a major star. Okay, sorry, I just didn't know the name. Probably when I see her. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she's a major movie star too. She's big in Hollywood, and yeah, her
Okay.
star is really, really big.
Okay. Okay,
Uh,
great. Other examples?
yeah, Venus lines are about romance. So if we look at John Lennon and Yoko Ono, Yoko is from Tokyo, and John has his Venus ascendant line running about 160 miles away from Tokyo. The attraction would run both ways, and he would feel more romantically attracted to women from this part of Japan, and they would also feel more attracted to him. In Yoko's ACG chart, we see Liverpool, England, where John is from, about 104 miles from her Venus MC line. This makes perfect sense as the MC is about career and Venus is about art and artistic expression. And they met at her solo exhibit in London at the Indica Gallery. If you are in an artistic or musical field, going to a Venus MC line can be very beneficial for fame and positive recognition, as well as inspiration. However, in Yoko's case, though, it's a bit more complicated as Liverpool is also about 35 miles from her Saturn MC line. When you go to places where Saturn is on your MC, your public reputation can suffer. And the way that you're viewed can be harsher and more criticized, often unfairly. Even if you aren't criticized, it's harder to be rewarded and promoted for your work, or you feel you have to work harder than everyone else to get what you are due. I think most would agree that there was a public debate on whether Yoko was responsible for the breakup of the Beatles, given that the year after they married, the band broke up. In my opinion, she was criticized excessively for something that wasn't her fault and that was meant to happen in any case due to factors outside of her control. So that's one example of the Venus line. Another example is Prince Harry. Los Angeles, California, where his wife Meghan Markle was born and raised, is about 260 miles from his Venus ascendant line. Similar to Yoko Ono in England, Prince Harry has a Saturn MC line running through England. London, where the royal family lives, is about 150 miles away from it, which is an intense effect. And this can explain why his reputation has suffered from the time he was a teenager to the present day, where his popularity remains low, particularly after leaving the royal family and publishing his book Spare. In this autobiography, he tells his side of the story of what he feels to be a lifelong unfair treatment from the British press and his own family, particularly when compared to his brother William. In contrast, he has reported feeling happier than he ever has been before living in Montecito with Megan and their two kids. London is about 220 miles from Megan's Sun MC line. Sun lines are about getting noticed by others, for better or for worse, particularly the Sun MC line, given that the MC is the most public point on the chart. Going to a Sun line can make you to some degree famous or notorious, but either way, you're likely going to be higher profile than you would normally be elsewhere. Also interesting is that she was only 40 miles from Mercury MC line, which gives a very, very strong felt sense of that planet in your life. Mercury is about communications, the way you express yourself. Meghan came under heavy fire for little things she said, where the British press would often twist her words or lie about her entirely. They even published a private letter she wrote to her father, which was against the law, and later she won a lawsuit against them for doing so. Meghan had stated several times that she felt that she didn't have a voice and that her manner of expression was censored by the royal advisors, and she wasn't really able to respond to the false reports circulating about her while a member of the royal family, often feeling that they would lie to protect other members of the royal family, but they wouldn't tell the truth to defend Meghan and Harry from unfair criticisms or outright lies. And at the same time, people widely admired her intelligence and her articulate speech when she gave public talks and attended royal engagements. While in England, she published her first book, Together, Our Community Cookbook, which was an effort to raise funds for the women of the Hub Community Kitchen who survived the Grenfell fire. So, very strong energy of both Mercury and the Sun while living in England.
Yeah, and sounds like shadow sides and positive sides of Mercury. That's a lot of Mercury going on in what you just said. Whoa. Yeah, that's. But you said something that the sun line was 2,000 miles away. Did you say that?
No, not 2000. It was like 200 something lines. Yeah. Up
Okay,
to about 300 lines, you are able to feel it. So
then
between
it's
200 and
close. Yeah.
300, I would say it's moderate effect.
Okay. Right. And I also noticed with the first one, it was sort of meant to be, as I heard it. Maybe it was specifically her chart around the Saturn influence. So, what is your view on that? I mean, that must be something that people ask you all the time because you also do numerology. How much can you do? How much can you affect your destiny?
Well, I believe, there are certain events that are definitely fixed karmas and they're predetermined. But I think at the same time, we all have free will. I think the amount of free will versus fate differs each person according to their own level of karma in different areas of their life. But there is definitely room for how you react to the events in particular. We might not be able to control the events that happen to us, but we can control how we react, and therein lies the power to overcome your karma in this life.
So I'm hearing the power is how you react, but then there's also power in finding another place to live, right?
Yes, I think so. I mean, once you're made aware of this knowledge, I think definitely if it's within your means, your family situation, your financial situation allows you to do so. I think you should definitely relocate. I think having the information and not doing anything about it, I'm not sure why people would do that, unless they were completely constrained and they couldn't go for some reason.
Do you want to know an annoying thing? Uh, the first time I was at an astrologer who did this astrocartography years ago, I realized that because I was planning to move somewhere else in Denmark, and I have been moving a lot in Denmark, but then I realized, it's not big enough. It doesn't make a difference. So that was kind of an annoying session. It was like, oh, it doesn't matter if you put me here or there because we're so small of a country.
Yeah, depending on how big or small a country, you can actually have multiple lines, major ACG lines running through the same country. And you can have more than one. Sometimes people have two or three running in the same country, or even more than that, depending on how your chart is set up, right? So it's not just one singular influence, but it's multiple.
Okay.
But you have to really carefully understand your natal chart and historically how it's been operating when you've been getting transits from the planets, how it's operating on your natal chart. Because without that, you can just make a mistake in which line you think is auspicious for you to go to. But in reality, it's not. Or maybe people don't consider the Purans, which is a major mistake. Going to a nice line, but on a difficult Quran can really make a difference in how you experience it there and not so nice of a way. But at the same time, if you're on a difficult line and you find that you can't move off the line for some reason, you don't have to move very far from your current city in order to get onto a different Quran. So maybe that could be a solution for
Interesting. I should get a second opinion. No, but that's really why I don't offer this as a service to clients, because it's just, I might, like you said, I might confuse something. And also, how do you do that? Because that must be a huge study with each client to learn how. I mean, there's some of it in general with a birth chart. In order to understand that, we kind of want to know about the influences and how it has worked out. But here it seems very important if it's on the client has a certain question, where to go, and so it seems very important with the detail of it.
Yes, I think you have to also understand the role of planets that are shadowed as well, especially if you're moving to a place where you get a shadowed planet. Can tell you a little bit about what a shadowed planet is. It's a planet in a cadent house, particularly the 12th house. A planet that receives stressful aspects, particularly from the outer planets. It's square or opposing the sun or moon. It could be on the western hemisphere of the chart, especially from the sixth to eighth houses, where they can be projected more easily, or debilitated through sign placement, totally unaspected by major aspects such as square, opposition, trine, sextile, and conjunction. If it's a singleton, particularly if it's also retrograde, and combust within a degree of the sun. So this shadowed planet is like an unconscious planet that on a normal basis, natally, one that isn't really working to its full degree of the potential of what it could be. But when it gets put on the angle, it becomes conscious. So when it's like a light being shed on that, right? So when it's brought to consciousness, it can seem like a dominating energy in the person's life. But I would consider this beneficial for self-growth and development, actually, right? Because anything that's unconscious is going to affect you in ways that you don't understand and can be self-sabotaging and self-limiting. As a psychodynamic therapist, that's my primary orientation. I give a lot of credence to the idea of free association when clients talk freely about what's on their mind, dreams, desires, anxieties, fears, short and long-term goals, relational matters, the blind spots that they have, the defense mechanisms that they have can be brought to the light of awareness and can gradually diminish over time because just being aware of them shifts your behavior, right? So the old energy dissolves and makes room for newer, more fruitful energy.
For sure, so that it doesn't dominate you. I mean, and if it's there in the chart, you might as well get it up so you can, like you say, be aware of it. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, definitely. I'm like thinking about people that I know having difficult astrology and thinking, what if it came to an angle? Because that's what we're talking about, right? That if it comes up to something that you can be more aware of.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, as a personal example, my favorite place in the world is Maui, Hawaii,
Yeah.
where I'm less than 200 miles from my Venus ascendant line,
Ah,
and I don't have other lines and Purans influencing Maui. My Venus is at 0 degrees Gemini, a planet at 0 degrees having the purest form of energy of the sign, where the traits in the sign are clearly noticeable in the person. My Venus does not have any major aspects. It's completely unaspected. And so it's considered, as what we talked about, a shadowed planet. So when you relocate to the shadowed planet, the traits will almost feel overemphasized there.
wow.
And when I first traveled to Maui at age 16, I just felt so beautiful and charming and magnetic, in touch with my sensuality and femininity. I received a wonderful reception from the people there, and it's just the place in this world where I really feel happiest. Just the purest sense of happiness and joy. And now that I work mostly remotely, I have been contemplating spending longer amounts of time there, and I'm definitely making a trip there sometime this year. Probably before the fall, to coincide with Jupiter making a conjunction to my
All
Venus.
right.
And in late May, Venus is going to be making its return, and the sun is also going to be around there at zeros Gemini. So that time seems pretty auspicious for me to be there. But yeah, I think for me, my Venus is well placed. If you have a planet that is not so well placed, I think it's still really good to travel and make that planet's energy more conscious, because it's good for your own, to break free of the bonds that are restricting you. Learning about yourself gives you power.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I want to ask you to look at what do we need to know? What do we feel like still sharing?
Yeah, so I want to give people also, an example of why you need to really consider carefully the natal aspects to a planet. And I'll illustrate this with an
Yeah.
example of a friend of mine. When the planet is challenged natally, if you place it on an angle, it will gain prominence and the difficulties will arise in a more noticeable way. It applies to benefics such as Jupiter and Venus. And so, for this reason, as I mentioned, it's not always beneficial to move to your Jupiter or Venus line. So, if Venus is well placed in the natal chart, it can bring more opportunities for romance if it's placed on an angle, particularly the descendant. However, with hard aspects to Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, it can weaken, or if it's in its detriment or fall, which are weak signs for it, such as Scorpio, Virgo, or Aries, it can definitely be challenged. So my friend, now in her mid 50s, who spent the majority of her adult life relocated less than 150 miles from her Venus descendant line, actually lived in two different states in the US, both of which had her Venus descendant line running right through them. She did get involved in a few relationships, but neither experience was fruitful. And she's been single the last 15 years, not out of choice, but unable to
Wow.
develop a strong positive emotional bond with someone. The reasons are that her Venus makes an exact square to Mars, which brings aggression into her love life, and also the tendency to attract partners that are going to be, more just not so wanting to engage in a harmonious relationship, perhaps saying things, doing things that they might even know will cause trouble, but they do it anyway.
I have that Venus
Um,
Mars square, so I'm totally with you on that. And so, but you have to give us some hope here. You have a Mars Venus square, and then you can't go anywhere to find love.
no, I don't think so. I think that you might have a more fruitful experience on a different line. That could be the key, like for example, if your Venus is in Gemini, then going to a Mercury line can also bring you love, right? I've seen that happen several
Okay, so
times
what
too.
you were
So
saying?
the key might be low. in a different
Right.
line.
So you're just saying not Venus in the seventh house is what you said.
Venus descendant lines are traditionally thought to be auspicious for finding love, right? Or if your Venus
Uh-huh.
descendant line is in an area that's not really that favorable, for example, gender violence, political strife, it can also apply for people from that background. You might fall in love with people from that background too. So there's different
Okay.
ways that the energy can express itself in any case.
Got it.
But going back to my friend, she also had her Venus in an exact square to Uranus, which can bring unexpected and erratic experiences, both of which have been true for her. And in addition to that, she's got Venus in Scorpio, which is its detriment, and then Venus is making a square to her ascendant descendant axis, both of which weaken the state of Venus. For instance, Venus square the ascendant descendant axis can cause you to undervalue yourself, not express enough love or kindness to yourself, and bring frequent misunderstandings with partners. And then on top of that, her Venus doesn't have any easy aspects and doesn't have any benefic planets aspecting it at
Oh
all.
man.
So that just to say that example, because, I don't want people kind of unfamiliar with astrology saying, I'm looking for love. I'm going to go to my Venus descendant line and that's, I'm going to have an easy time of it. And it's like, no, to put on the brakes a little bit and study your chart more carefully to determine which line will actually be more fruitful for you in that case.
That is such good advice. That is such good advice. I love that. I love it even because astrocartography is getting more popularized, right? And even the education that I've had has been in depth, but it's not. I'm very aware that I cannot offer this as a service yet, for sure. So, I mean, I think it's a huge study and lots to be aware of.
Oh yeah, I mean, astrocartography, the way that it's popularized, on TikTok, Instagram, and things, a lot of these people don't have adequate knowledge of how it really works or how to piece it together, or they themselves read bits of pieces online. It takes a lot of effort to study it. You really can't get around studying the charts and engaging with clients for readings and watching in real time what the effects actually are to make the informed decisions because clients come to astrologers with weighty decisions on their mind. And, of course, we say don't make the decision entirely based on what we say, but still what we say has that gravity behind it. And there's
For
a need
sure.
to have your research and, do the best that you possibly can and be very thorough with what you're saying. So, yeah, I mean, I would caution against people watching TikTok and Instagram and even people on YouTube and things who may not have that experience behind them to be able to give you a good reading.
Have you always known you wanted to do this? You said you started by the age of 11 to study these kind of things. Have you tried to go down another path? Or has this just been it for you?
I just have such a strong passion. Like astrology is the sister of psychology. I knew also from that age I wanted to have a private psychology practice, and that's exactly what happened. That's what I do these days. The majority of my time is spent doing psychotherapy sessions, doing astronumerology sessions. I really just love it intrinsically, and I think that that's most important. You have to have that motivation for understanding people, their personality, their life trends by just engaging with people and listening to their life stories. Like, I just love reading autobiographies and biographies. Yeah, I
Okay.
just love it.
That's a great way to do it. You get the whole biography and then you look at the charts and yeah, all of the transits and the progressions going on throughout the life. Is that what you've been doing?
Yes, I think, I started off with following how it was working in family and friends, like how the charts were manifesting themselves. Then I started to study celebrity charts, just because that was easier to track. And then eventually
Hmm.
I started to do readings like when I was around 20 or so. I started to give professional readings and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. So and so you honestly you never considered another career path.
No, no. Ever since I was 11, I knew I wanted to
Okay.
do psychology and
That's
astrology,
so
and
cool.
that's what happened.
That is so cool. Okay, I'm gonna stop asking you about the same thing. Oh, that is really nice. I'm a Pisces, so I have a lot of that Neptunian confusion you were mentioning before. So I admire someone who's been that clear all along. That's pretty cool. Okay, so Samantha, do you have anything on your heart here in the end? Anything that we need to kind of gather together and talk about in the end here?
I think what I would most like people to understand is that astrocartography is not a separate fact from the natal chart. They really have to be studied in conjunction. Your chart is your karmic potential, the little slice of karma that you will experience in this life. And so we're not trying to run away from things or avoid things because difficult experiences, they lead to growth. They make you who you are. They create that resiliency and that strength of character. And I think people shouldn't be afraid of traveling to more difficult lines because they teach you about yourself, and that information about yourself is priceless. The unexamined life, to me, it's not worth living. So have an adventurous spirit. If your heart is calling you somewhere, go. Like, follow the inner calling of your heart. You don't need to make sure that you're not, you're on a so-called good line. There's something to be learned there, just like everyone in life is a teacher, not just the ones who are easy and pleasant to interact with, but the people who push your buttons too, right? Because they show you where you still need to work on yourself and work towards that self actualization. So always honor your heart's calling, like pay attention to your gut, see how your body is feeling. When you think about a place, do you feel do you feel excited or compelled to go there for some reason? Then go and make plans, book the Airbnb. Just go ahead, because if you think about it too much, it's analysis paralysis, and you'll never go. So just create the time in your schedule and go and travel. Traveling for me as Jupiter in the ninth house, I've had very lucky experiences in traveling, and I've traveled a lot in life, which I'm very, very grateful for. Traveling is really the best teacher, more so than any book or movie or conversation or anything. Like, it just accelerates your development in so many ways, broadens your perspective. So, if you have the chance, visit all your lines. I wouldn't say move to all your lines, but visit your lines and, become someone who is more well-rounded and whole.
Wow. Wow. What a cheerleading. Thank you so much. Wow, that's a lot. I love the piece about that we all each other's teachers, and as well you can say with all the lines, even the good and the bad, we're all teaching each other all the time. That is so good. I have a little crazy ritual about taking a screenshot of me and my guest. Would that be okay?
Of course.
I think I've learned it by now. Yes. Are we smiling? 1, 2, 3 now. Yay. Okay, good. I got it. All right. Thank you so much. And Samantha, people can find you on astronumerologywisdom.com.
Yeah, that is my astronumerology site.
Do you have other sites since you put it like that?
My psychotherapy site is
Oh,
www.samanthaisamuels.com. I'm actually just in the process of redesigning my whole site though, so I'm going to have an entirely new
okay.
psychotherapy site next month. So, yeah, I'm really
Oh,
excited for that.
great. That's so funny. I found you from this one. That's because I was specifically targeting people who's merging psychology and astrology. So so this popped up. But But I'll put in a link so people can find you with no confusion at all.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you today. And
It's been so great to learn. Oh man. There's so much more to learn. I feel I need to dive deep into this. This is really inspiring.
yes, such a vast, I mean, I think no one, it's an ocean. You can never get satiated. There's just never enough. It's also my North Node in the ninth house or my Rahu in the ninth house. I can never learn enough. I'm always hungry after it.
That's good. That's good. That's good. There's something to do here in this life then. Thank you so much, Samantha. Be well, be safe out there
You as well.
on all your journeys.
All right.
Thank you.
See you again.